Imagine you and your family being always watched from the shadows, being hunted day in and day out by very powerful people. Imagine every single cop in the city trying to find a chance to put you and your family behind bars. All to find out a secret you alone know, a secret that can tear apart everything you hold dear and completely destroy your family. And the only possible way you can survive, the only way you can keep your family safe, is if you stay 3 steps ahead of everyone at all times. This was what George, a struggling businessman, found his life to be after one tragic night. George is a hard-working orphan who lives in a remote village with his beautiful wife and his 2 sweet daughters. George's entire world revolved around his wife and his 2 daughters, and he loved them to bits. Even after 17 years of marriage, every time he saw his wife, George felt the same spark he felt when he first laid eyes on her. His wife loved him, and he was the support pillar of her life. Their 2 daughters, Anju, the oldest, and Anu, the youngest, idolized and loved their father. The village they lived in was slowly adapting to technology and didn't have cell phone coverage in many places. Though George was a junior high school dropout, he had an excellent memory, and being a movie fanatic, he had a knack for remembering scenes and dialogues from all the movies he had ever watched. This talent of his had helped him immensely in many ways. Through watching movies in multiple languages, he had a grasp of conversing in over 4 languages, which had helped him greatly in his business ventures. He also had the uncanny ability to solve problems by applying what he had learned from movies in real life. This skill of his has been helpful for the people around him, as he was almost always able to come up with some kind of solution when somebody asked for his advice. For the last few years, he has been saving every penny he can get his hands on to buy and run the local movie theater. Over the years, George, through his perseverance and hustling, was able to own a building in his town, of which on the first floor he ran his cable TV operations business and had given the ground floor out for rent. Initially, lately structural issues had started creeping in on the floor of the property, and he was unable to give it out for rent, so he seeks help from his newly found friend, an engineer who had recently came to town to build the local police station. After inspecting the building, the engineer promises to help him fix the problems with the building floor, and they move on to grab a bite. This was where they stumble upon a cop, Sahadevan, who is in loggerheads with the engineer, as Sahadevan had demanded a bribe from him for letting him do the construction work of the police station. As Sahadevan and the engineer start arguing, George gets in between them and starts shouting at the cop. As a crowd starts gathering, the cop flees the scene, vowing to take revenge on George. George often ends up spending nights at his office, and on one fateful day, George returns home in the morning after work to find his wife and daughters sobbing and huddled together. They looked frightened to death, and seeing this, a cold chill ran down his spine. He learns that his eldest daughter, Anju, was blackmailed by Varun, the son of a very powerful police officer, and he had tried to sexually assault her. The guy had seen her in a camp organized by a nature club on a hill station a few weeks ago, where student representatives of multiple schools had attended, and he had secretly recorded naked videos of her bathing. He then tracked her down and offered to delete the videos, provided she slept with him. A mortified Anju refuses to agree to his demands and pleas with Varun to let her go, but Varun refuses to hear her pleas, tells her that he will come in the night for her, and asks her to be ready for him. At night, it's raining cats and dogs when Varun creeps into George's property. He looks around slowly in the dark and notices the girl standing, scared, near the shed next to the house. Varun is pleased the girl had obeyed him and enters the building to find Rani, her mother, standing inside. She starts begging him to leave her daughter alone. Enraged, Varun asks Anju's mother to sleep with him instead, and he proceeds to assault her. A scared and livid Anju grabs hold of a rod and hits Varun on the head, which instantly kills him. Scared and confused, the mother-daughter duo covers him in a cloth bag and buries him in their backyard. The noise they were making while burying the corpse woke up the younger daughter, and she witnessed her mother and sister doing the burying. George becomes numb, clueless as to what to do, and realizes this is the end of his family unless he does something. He promises his scared daughter that he will never let her or his family go to jail for this. George takes a deep breath, closes his eyes, and racks his brain to find a way to save his family. From this point on, George starts crafting a meticulous plan, which ultimately makes the entire police force run after their own tails. First, he examines the scene of the crime to make sure no blood residues are left behind and cleans up the place. Then he examines the items he found on the floor and finds Varun's SIM card, which he pockets, and finds a car key, which he learns could be a yellow hatchback from his daughter. Next, he asks his family to stay locked up in the house, make it look like nobody is in the house, and only open the door for him when he returns in the evening. He then goes in search of the yellow car and finds it parked nearby, but while trying to open the car, he sets off the car's alarm by mistake. Little to George's knowledge, he gets noticed by the cop, Sahadevan, whom he was quarreling with only a few days ago. Next, he drives Varun's car to town, buys a second-hand cell phone, inserts the SIM he got before from the scene of the crime, and turns on the phone. He then cleans the phone with alcohol to get rid of his fingerprints and throws the phone into an interstate truck to make the police think Varun is traveling in case they start tracking his number. He then gets rid of the car in a pond near an abandoned mine. George knew that he needed a strong alibi and set forth to create one. On returning home in the evening, he asks his wife and children to save the bills for everything they buy or do from this point on. In the meantime, Varun's parents are trying to find him, and the fact that his mother is the chief of police has put immense pressure on the police force to find him as soon as possible. His mother, Geetha, was an extremely intelligent police officer who has been able to climb up the ladder to be the chief of police only because of her skills and ingenuity. We learn Varun was in fact a spoiled brat and had been a constant headache for his parents, but in spite of this, his parents loved him. The police force realized a few weeks after tracking his cell phone that they were chasing down a rabbit hole, and this could be a misdirection, and Varun may very well have never left the city at all. They understood that his phone was switched off on August 2nd, and on August 3rd, his number came online again, but with a different IMEI number, meaning it was a different phone. They send a fax out of the picture of the car Varun was driving, and Sahadevan, the same cop who had a grudge against George, instantly realizes that this is the same car he saw George driving a few weeks ago. He lets his superiors know, and the police zero in on George and his family. Soon they find out that George's daughter must have known Varun, as they went to the same nature camp a month ago, and they approached George's daughter at her school and began questioning her to see if she knew what had happened to Varun. His daughter, being trained well by George, is composed and tells them that she had indeed seen him in the camp she attended and has not seen him since. And on asking about the dates of August 2nd and 3rd, she tells them that she and her family had gone out of town to attend a convention in a church on those 2 days. The police then go to George's house and question George and his wife, and before asking anything, the wife blurts out that they had not been home on the 2nd and 3rd of August. The police become suspicious as they had never mentioned the dates to her, but George saves the situation by saying that their daughter's teacher had already called them and told them about their entire conversation the police had with her. George provides them bills and tickets for their travel and expenses on the 2nd and 3rd of August. The police are still a bit suspicious and call in George and his family for questioning a few days later. There, they remain calm and recount the events of the 2nd and 3rd of August and provide minute details such as the hotel they had stayed in, the time they had checked in, the restaurants they had eaten at, what they ate, the movie they had watched, conversations from people they met, and even the message that was preached at the convention. No matter how the police questioned them, even the smallest child answered their questions with clarity, almost as if they had indeed been out of town these 2 days. The police realize that these may have been falsified bills and are underestimating George, as he is just a school dropout. They are sure they can put an end to this if they bring in the so-called eyewitnesses. They brought in everybody George's family had claimed they had met on the 2nd and 3rd of August. The police knew for sure they would not corroborate with George's family's statements, but became dumbfounded as everyone who was brought in remembered meeting George's family and confirmed that they had indeed met or seen George's family on the 2nd or 3rd of August. George's family had a strong alibi with multiple eyewitnesses, which proved that they were indeed in a different town on the 2nd and 3rd of August. The police had to let go of George and his family. Their only lead, who everyone had the gut feeling was responsible for Varun's disappearance, had a solid alibi that they were nowhere near Varun at the time of his disappearance. Meanwhile, George starts planning ahead, as he knows the police will catch up. He tells his brother-in-law, a politician, that the police will take his family to question them again, and he asks him to call all the news reporters he knows and tell them that his family is being tortured by the police. Geetha, Varun's mom, thinks hard, comes up with a theory, and realizes that they had grossly underestimated George. She admits begrudgingly that he could, in fact, be smarter than the whole lot of them. The theory she comes up with is that George, on the 3rd of August, on the morning he returned home to find his family had murdered Varun, took Varun's car, got rid of it, and later went to town where the convention was held and bought food from restaurants for 4, bought movie tickets for 4, etc., and collected the bills as proof. Then, on August 3rd and 4th, he took his family and went to town to recreate the events on August 2nd and 3rd. On the 4th of August, he and his family stayed in the church like they would for the convention to recreate the 2nd of August, and saw that a video copy of the convention was available on demand, which he bought under a false name. He and his family go over the footage closely later, and on August 5th, they recreate the events on August 3rd based on the bills and tickets George had collected on August 3rd. When checking into the hotel, he had signed himself under a different name in different handwriting, and distracting the hotel receptionist, he added his name under August 2nd's register. And the reason why all the eyewitnesses clearly remember George and his family is because he fabricated situations to meet them later on in the weeks to come, and with a bit of social engineering cemented into their memory that they had met him on the 3rd of August with his family. The police rightly understood that with such a strong alibi, they could do little to prosecute them, and their only chance was to physically torture them until they cracked to get the truth out of them. They drag George and his family out of their home and takes them back to the police station for questioning. George's brother-in-law calls up the media like George had requested him beforehand. The police started cruelly torturing George, his wife, his older daughter, and even the smallest daughter for hours until finally the youngest daughter, scared to death, told them she would show them the place they buried the body if they left her family alone. Triumphant, the police take George and his family back to their house, and amid a huge crowd and reporters from the press, they start digging the place where the little girl had seen her mother and sister burying Varun's body. Soon, the stench of decaying corpse hits their noses. Varun's father and mother open the sack with tears and see the rotting corpse of a cow instead. While everybody stands there dumbfounded, George runs over to the crowd, pleads for their help, and tells them about the physical torture they faced, and how even the little child was cruelly beaten up by the cop, Sahadevan. The crowd raises an uproar, and a riot ensues. As the enraged crowd chases Sahadevan to beat him up, the police escorts Varun's mother and father outside. The case catches a lot of news and media attention because of the police brutality, and the court soon issues an order to the police not to question George and his family again unless substantial evidence is found. Years later, we see George coming regularly every month to sign the register at the local police station. This is standard procedure to make sure a person of interest hasn't absconded. The police, in spite of their best efforts, were never able to find Varun's body, and without finding the body, they have no means to prosecute George and his family. The question remains as to what George has done with the body, and we are shown George's secret, a secret he alone knows, the place where he had hidden the body. As the movie ends, we see that on August 3rd, he removed the body from his yard and buried it in the basement of the then-constructed police station. All these years, what the police have been searching for has been right under their feet.